Welcome to Flow Dive, where we talk about flow, focus, creative life, and living unconventionally. Today, my guest is Candace Moran, and I am very excited because I haven't spoken with Candace in a long time, and I think this is going to be a really, really fun interview. So I encourage you to relax and maybe turn off your distractions and really think about the similarities or the differences between you and this artist we're about to explore, Candace, and your thoughts about flow in your creative life. Candace, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I feel super honored that I got invited to be on Anna's podcast. And like she said, we haven't seen each other in a while or even talked in a while. So I'm super excited to chat and catch up and yeah, just maybe even in the podcast, learn more things about flow.
Cool. So Candace, I know you as an illustrator and photographer. What are you up to now and what are you working on?
So things have changed very, very slightly. Still illustrator and rising commercial artist. I stopped doing photography in the professional sense, but still, always want to dabble with my camera and play around with that. But I am really, I guess, pursuing my science illustration aspect of things and what I call artivism, which is, just activism through my art for the environment and, our interconnectedness with the environment. I'd like to say that I'm also starting to embrace the jack of all trades saying, which I felt was like a super negative before, because I felt like, oh, you're not really into anything specifically, but now I'm kind of realizing that it's a superpower that I, am able to do so many different things and I see how they connect together. So that's super important to me. And I am starting a new mentorship with the aquarium with their science illustrator and graphic artist on staff. And I had my first session yesterday. It was super cool. So we're just getting in the top of it, but hopefully I'll be helping out with some really cool projects and educational things where I'll get to draw a lot of animals and really just build my portfolio. So I'm excited.
Very, very cool. I'm glad that you mentioned this acceptance of you exploring lots of different things and interests and skills because there is a lot of like mental garbage out there about, you know, pick one thing, follow your
Yeah.
passion. And it's like, but what if we have like a lot of passion for life
Yeah.
in general? So, can you expand upon some of your experience? Because it is very, it's a wide field of what you've gotten into and what you're passionate about. And I'm really happy to hear that you're returning to the science and biology and now, ocean life with
Yeah.
your work.
Yeah. So I definitely just started to accept, um, I guess, the different multifacetedness of me. And I think that that's a really hard thing for, I mean, all of us, but definitely a lot of artists is like, especially with illustration, it's style, style, style. And, you want to find you in your artwork. So it becomes really difficult where you're like, what parts of me do I leave out? And how do I compress that into a little box of a style for everyone else to view and digest? And so I kind of just am letting myself, let myself shine through as much as I can in various different ways. And within doing that, I realized, well, maybe instead of just kind of embracing only my artist side or only my scientific side, how about I continue to go down the track that I, was originally intending and say, maybe I'm both. And maybe I approach my art like a scientist or, and it's okay to be artistic and sometimes analytical and how you go through the process and that, the various ways that they form together is what makes my art interesting and unique. And with that being said, it's also something that I'm like, okay, I can also still explore my avenues with children's books and even like animations and various things. And there's just, so many different projects and, like you said, a wide range of avenues out there for me to explore while doing professional work and for professional work. So, I'm, like I said, I'm just starting to really see it as a superpower now. And it really is fulfilling to me to think about that I could be doing something that might help people understand their connection with the world and everything around us. And especially in a time right now while we're really, you know, in a place of climate panic and anxiety, kind of helping give people some, resource of like, okay, like, I'm doing what I can to try to understand this, as well as even kids to kind of, want to take steps to how can we figure this out rather than, this kind of like gray cloud doomsday thing like hanging over us or anything like that. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of a load off. We're still right at the beginning of it and we're still, making our way through. But yeah, I feel like I'm finally getting some traction, some steps for some direction. And my mentor with the aquarium, the mentorship, she's very aware of like uh, how we're going to move forward is definitely going to be around of like even more refining that direction and exploring and kind of taking some of that pressure off, making these like decisions of you have to be this kind of artist and this one particular avenue because you never know. I could just be making advertising stickers one day that happen to be including a whale. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's talk about those pressures for a moment because I know personally I have put a lot of pressure on myself before as an artist to be a certain way, to choose a medium, to whatever. And what's funny about that pressure is like it kind of seems like, at least in my life, I always return to what I originally was interested in,
Yeah.
somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing, since I started working with my art therapist, I've been doing kind of a little bit of like a regressive exploration of like my childhood inspirations and the things that I would like pull out, what kind of like excited me. And I mean, even down to like watching some of those like shows I watched when I was a kid that, which is amazing that they're just on streaming right now, like Rocket Power and, some of the goofy things that I just like loved the animation style and everything. And I'm like, oh yeah, like again, another side of me that, maybe hasn't been like getting what it's needed. So I've been exploring a lot of projects that I'm able to kind of take that pressure off myself and just play more. And that might look like, you know, maybe instead of trying to create something with a more realistic and naturalist point of view, I might create something that's a little bit more, you know, simplified, which we had a lot of discussions about that with working on the children's book was how to simplify something and still make it, suitable to where I like to go with my style, but then also for a different audience. And, I know that growing up, if I could like just jump into a Lisa Frank folder and like live in that world, I would have. And like, I mean, I've even been like, all right, pink, purple, like everything is just, I'm just kind of like letting my inner little girly child kind of like come out. And that's definitely just removing some of the pressure. It's just kind of like a reminder of like, why do I like doing this? Is it just because I wanted to do this for money or for, this like comfort thing of saying I could and getting past, all the stereotypes or what others told me I couldn't do. But it feels like it's feeling more personal now. Now that I finished school and I've kind of like got over this little tiny hump, I definitely was letting that pressure get to the bottom of my artwork and kind of like leech in and take over everything. And, I think we all have the perfectionist inside of us, and mine's really loud, but I'm trying to kind of like, hey, you know, maybe you're not needed at some points.
Yeah, I can totally identify with this. And the funny thing about creative people is that this is something that I'm trying to sort through, and I've always tried to elevate the value of creativity in everything that I do, and the encouragement, and why I became a coach and kept going on the path of many different art fields, um, and gained so many skills. But it's almost like we are here, we exist to remind people what play is.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's extremely valuable. Yet there's this like push and pull of like, oh, but that's not really valuable. But it's like, what? Isn't that the whole point of life, is joy and play and like,
Yeah,
that part of life? It has to be a balance, right?
right.
Um,
Yeah.
so why can't we balance out the rest of the world just by being ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's like, I know you do some stand up as well, but I mean, even like comedians, like somebody could be like, what's the value of like just standing up there and talking? Like you just make people laugh. It's for that exact reason, to kind of, it's a way that like you artistically are putting people in check or sharing your perspective of the world and kind of like helping people jump out of their own perspective, and that's super important. And also, how do you even put value on another person's perspective, another person's style of play per se, or their visual language? It's an interesting thing that has crossed my mind here and there of like, you know how do we really like actually assign value to things outside of just money? Like I think joy, like you said, is probably like the best currency of that, of like, whatever brings you the most joy is the thing that you should hold the most value.
Yes. And it's sort of like this ongoing process for us to see our own value and then not back down when outsiders are like, oh, there's a little,
Yeah.
um, not back down when people don't see the same value, and know that that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that they don't value it, but I want to find people who do,
Yeah.
because those are my people, right?
Yeah.
um, so it's interesting. So let's talk about flow, because that's like my sweet spot. That's what I love to talk about.
Yep.
Did you have ideas of flow before we met, before we worked together? And for those of you listening, we worked together, and I was her coach for a while, and through some really difficult times in her art career. And hopefully, I was able to help her and guide her
Absolutely.
positively. So, did you have ideas of flow before we met? And then what did you learn? Like, what does flow mean to you?
So I guess my idea for a flow before we met, I'd heard of it in maybe a movie or something where they talked about like, like, yeah, you got to get in that groove or that flow kind of, or I knew the feeling. And I can't remember if I started working with you after the movie Soul came out or before the animated one. And they talk heavily about like the flow state in that movie, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I guess I kind of like had like an innate understanding of it because I'd experienced it, but I didn't have, any of the technical understanding that you like brought out when or when you coached me. And, even the concept of like how it isn't just this one thing that my brain does. For me, I realized that flow is just this permeability almost of like our entire lives. Like we're energy, we're matter, the way that we move through everything in our life and how we interact with different energies and frequencies, that all affects our flow and the balance of how our energy shifts and moves. So I've definitely, working with you, learned a lot about just how to, I don't even want to say control, but manipulate energy, which is really, really, really cool. And has helped me so much because I didn't understand before how much I was doing that was just spreading my energy everywhere. I was just spraying it out like a sprinkler, and there was none left for me. But yeah, I mean, it's just, not only is it a really cool thing because it's, it kind of tickles my like holistic and spiritual mind, but then also at the same time, it's scientific. There's, quantifiable data and visuals of it, like it's something that it branches both, and that's kind of like my art and science mind together. So it really resonates with me. And yeah, I mean, I've started to even realize like the way of how I move through my day and how flow really affects that. Like I can kind of tell now when, okay, things aren't flowing for me. I'm not getting in the flow state today, or I'm not able to even sit down to even like approach a project because of X, Y, and Z back there that didn't allow me to like have this balance and set this up. And even like, pretty much I didn't put myself in the place where I could get there. So that's just a really interesting way to like look at life, but also just productivity overall. I don't know if that makes sense the way I just pieced all that together, but
No, it makes sense. And it's one thing to kind of know your own energy, which many people do. But it's another to really, really get efficient with it in the way of like you setting yourself up for the likelihood of flow to happen rather than feeling like everything's against you. And so we know this from science, but personally, like, okay, if there's friction in front of something, then it's unlikely, right? It's much more effort to get there. And the interesting thing about flow is like it can be applied to anyone and any subject.
yeah.
I think is really beautiful. But do you have like a sensation when you're in flow, like physically in your
I
body?
think I feel like when I'm in flow, I could describe it as, and I just thought of this. I'm like, maybe there's a difference like in different parts of being in flow that feels slightly different, but I definitely feel like I'm so deep in my body that I'm not in my head. I'm just kind of like this like zombie that's just like going after it and just like, you know, not even going through the motions or moving through it, but I'm just like doing it. Like I'm almost, it's like I'm so present that like I'm not even aware of my body or my mind. It's like I'm a leaf. I'm existing and doing what I'm supposed to be doing while existing. And yeah, it's a really cool feeling, and it's something that like, when you get out of it or you reflect back on it, you're like, oh yeah, that was that. It's like my brain and the paper and my hand and the pencil, they're all one.
Yes, totally. That is described perfectly. And for me, it's sort of like the way I've been trying to articulate, because words, as we know as artists, don't always do it, right?
Yep.
It's sort of this merging of conscious and unconscious. And there's an intention sometimes when you decide and you're like, I would like to get into flow. But then there's this really fun thing where once you get your routines and your goals and your idea and self-confidence and self-concept kind of interwoven, it's almost like flow happens a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have like noticed that like when I get into flow and I'm in a space, whether it's this little office space or, on my front porch out there by myself, I feel like it's kind of like, I don't know, like the movie The Butterfly Effect, where like everything's like spinning around. He's like going in different places and everything, and like he's just like still, but it's this like overwhelming sense of like calm and just it's almost like I can visualize in my brain like there's just like the glitter emojis around. Like it's just like a glow where everything is just like, there it is. That's the magic moment. Like you're in it, and like that's just like so satisfying to like be able to just kind of like have that. I don't even want to call it an aha, because it's like it's not like a split second. It's a continual point in time, but it's like the way that I even feel like my movements are like flow. Like when I'm making lines, I'm like even just kind of moving, and it's like graceful. It's almost like I'm like, dancing with the paper, rather than when, you're unsure of yourself and you're not necessarily in the flow state and you're kind of like sketching something, if that's not your medium or something like that, and you're starting to play your instrument and you're kind of like filling up chords, or like something's like feeling off and you're like, I don't know. And then once you like get into it, you kind of like relax and you get present, that's when that friction goes away and you just like are in it. And next thing you know, you're like, hey, where's the time's gone,
Yes, I do know. And what Candace is talking about is part of the flow cycle. So we have struggle, release, flow, and recovery. And while we're on the subject, do you have specific lifestyle choices that you've made that have become part of your like success structures, we'll call them, that have really stuck with you? Because I know when we were working together, there was a lot of life transitions. And
Yeah.
during that time, for anyone, it can be so chaotic, and you can just feel like, I just want to give up. Like, I don't want to. I just want to be a vegetable on the couch or something.
Yeah. I still feel that sometimes, but I think that it's definitely still a work in progress to kind of like remove a lot of these frictions and really, be solid on routines and things that will help me kind of have those things set up. But I've definitely, after we worked together, I realized, and you pointed out, the certain places and things that like help me see what exactly I actually really needed to be productive, because, kind of like right now, I'm double fisting my green tea and water, but some of the things I need, yeah, like some of the things I need is, I need my water bottle, I need my planner, because I need to have it right in front of me. I need to be in either my front porch or, in a place that's comfy and I can, have natural light and see out into the world, because then I don't get the FOMO of like, well, what's going on out there? I need to go take a break and look outside. Or, even wanting to like just go step in the grass in my backyard, and it's not that I'm always in front of a screen doing artwork or even, doing kind of like office work, but even like as artists and drawing something fun, you still at some point in time are like, I kind of want to just like go in the grass, or I kind of want to just go jump in the ocean real quick. And yeah, I've realized that like I need kind of like these comfort things around, and I need to kind of like feel free and not trapped and enclosed, because that kind of, it almost feels like a creative block, that when it's like the room is like a little bit of a box and I have to get out of it.
This is really, really fascinating, because what you're talking about is very much you. You are interested in the elements of existence, which include water and air and ground, and like so you inside of your purpose, if you're not interacting with those things, then it doesn't feel like you're actually living.
Yeah, that makes a
So
lot of sense.
yeah. And that is because you have either felt the absence of those things and realized that you to be on a better path, a more joyous path, those things need to be present. And so you are designing your life in a way where this is part of how I'm existing, and sort of letting go of this conventional idea of productivity.
Yeah.
In you know how I feel about it's like, why are we optimizing everything in life?
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
can we just be? Can we just be and then do some of the things? Like, every second does not need to be maximized.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, where does the pace like stop? Like how like we can't like speed ourselves up any faster, but I'm like, when do we overstack? I already feel like we're already there. So many more
Yeah,
people are experiencing burnout, depression, anxiety, from a variety of things. And it's tough because we're stacking so much that we're like, well, where's the time to take care of myself? Where's the time
yeah,
to even have these moments of realization where it's like, oh, to feel alive, I need to go sit in the grass, or like hug a
yeah.
tree. And yeah, that's a tough spot for anyone, artist and not artist.
I love talking about this because I am not a fan of the camps of flow and productivity that's just like more, 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 more. And I'm like, what about just like quality over quantity and
Yeah,
the depth of your experience? Because the depth, I feel like, is when you're able to mm, take in or breathe in the meaning.
yeah,
But if we go so fast and it's always about more and optimizing and productivity, then it's like, well, do you have the depth of the experience, or have you already forgotten it? You know, that's just personally how I feel about it.
no, I mean that's 100% because that just makes me think of the fact of that I myself had a lot of anxiety and frustrations when I even like found you and was seeking you out because I was so focused on the end result. I was so focused on just jumping through, moving, stacking, productivity. Like I gotta get this portfolio together. I gotta have all these things. So it was like just seeing how do I get to there, but then forgetting about the process, the depth of it, it's we're always striving for quality, but it was really just focused on like, okay, like, it'll be good. I just got to get these done. I got to get them out. But and that's setting yourself up to struggle and feel that anxiety when you're so focused on the end result that you almost like don't even see how you even get there and how to even approach it, how to do it. And yeah, I mean, I'm super thankful that I worked with you because now I'm even able to that much more have some presence in my process and feel connected to it and feel that depth. And I know that that's going to make for a much better end result always than skipping over that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I it's always an honor to work with people who understand me and are willing to like learn about flow,
Yeah.
and in the context of their own life, because that's what I do. Every person's flow is different, and whether I get really sciency or I get more on the like, dare I say, woo woo
I know.
side, the existential side, right? So
Yes.
I love talking about this. I love hearing you talk about it because, I've watched you grow as a person. And we worked together for over a year, a little over a year.
Yeah.
And it was really inspiring. And it did remind me of my own journey of music as well. Because I played different styles. I, tried different instruments. I performed for many different types of people. But I've just now arrived at more of what feels like home. in style, people I play with, the music we make, these things, how I feel toward music. Whereas before, it was different. It wasn't lesser than, it was just different.
Right.
But yeah, when we are able to pause and kind of acknowledge what we're doing, who we're being, and how it all integrates, I feel like, it's a better experience. It's just better than like check,
Sure. Yeah.
award,
Yeah.
whatever accolades, shallow compliments or just compliments. Like there has to be felt by you as well.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I feel like that leads to the whole thing of like, what is it all for?
Yes.
If you don't have that, and it also just so much of that focus on like the end result, it leaves so much open space for you to kind of like diminish yourself and where you're at, and burn out and giving up. It just, all of those things like pile together because you're not really like serving you. And I'm starting to realize that I was experiencing so much like paralysis and making art. I know we were talked about it so much, and I've been talking about it, working with it through my art therapist too, is that like, I'm like, yeah, like all I want to do is make art all day. But for some reason, I can't even pick up a pen, pencil, whatever it is. And because I'm so like pent up on like, jumping to the end, that, I don't even know, what the process feels like anymore. And like that dopamine release of like, hey, you like doing that, remember, like, you like how a marker feels on the paper, how it feels to slosh around and paint and everything. And I definitely have been really trying. I made a pottery hand built piece recently, and it was like a charcuterie dish for my mother-in-law for Mother's Day, and it ended up coming out so good. But it felt so good to just like play and clay, like slip and glaze. And then, even like I've been experimenting with a lot of like dried flowers and like making collages with like 3D elements, but flowers specifically, and trying to kind of see how I can integrate those things, or even use like negative space and cut out stuff and just be silly almost, and just remembering like the parts and pieces of the process that I like. And yeah, so it's definitely you can't just get to one end or the other without the other stuff in between. So
You know what is so funny is that, I mean, I've done this and I've heard many artists say that it's like that we're being silly, but we're actually just carrying out the first part of the process, which is like exploration and
yeah.
getting the feedback, right?
Yep.
Immediate feedback is a huge part of flow as a trigger. But yeah, let's see. Let me make sure I'm hitting all the points today
Oh
with
yeah.
you. So when we were working together, it was a really hectic time for you, and I'm sure there were moments that were uncomfortable, to say the least. What was it that was sort of inside of you that called to you or said there was like a message for you that was like, just keep going? Well, do you have a feeling of like, what was it that helped
Kept
you
me
get to
going.
here? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say that I've kind of just always had this, I don't know, some people call it this silly optimism, that I just always think I'm going to be able to figure it out. And even if I don't see the path to doing so, I kind of just blind faith of like, I'm going to keep on stepping through it because I want this. And, looking back, I'm like, I didn't go through all of that for nothing. I did that so I could get to here, and whatever here is going to look like. And kind of just accepting that, like, it's not it's not even about whether like the path looks perfect or not good enough. It's more or less of like, what am I doing to move forward? The photography job that I had right before we had finished working together was, it was a means to move forward. And we talked about that a lot, where it was like, it was really tough. It was a struggle, but it was also, I learned a lot about how I work, how I do things. And I guess I kind of, what motivates me is just always thinking about everything in line of like how it's going to help me move forward with my career, and just finding kind of like deep in myself a little spark of joy whenever there's any type of something that I could attribute to like a step forward or like added to it. And the other day I was talking with somebody and they were like, how do you celebrate like whenever like something happens? And I was like, that's a good question. I don't really know. And I was like, I think I go get a pastry from my favorite like vegan shop, which is true. I definitely celebrate with sweets, but it's not good because I'll do that a little too much. But I've started to realize that I also kind of just like allow myself, like I keep it on the inside, and I need to start working on getting it out there and like really, like you said, that positive feedback. But yeah, I guess I've always like acknowledged within myself personally the little things that I do that have like helped me move forward and allow that to like excite me about the next thing. And sure, I get super frustrated with the pace of my progress forward. That's very difficult when, especially among a lot of big life events happening, and, kind of like wanting to progress forward in life in a way. And, not that we're not doing that, but just overall, just thinking about like your future self and like where you want to be. And, it's hard to kind of sometimes like when you don't have that linear path of how to get to where you want to be, as others do with like some other career paths and everything, it's hard to not measure yourself against that, and to especially as like an artist, keep going when a lot of people are like, wow, yeah, you're drawing pictures over there doing arts and crafts while so-and-so's out there busting their ass, So, but yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm not completely answering your question all the way, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I don't know. I just tell myself that I want this really bad, and that there's kind of like nothing that's going to get in my way, and I'll figure it out. Like I had been looking for someone like you for forever. And then I walked into Seats one day and like looked at the post or the bulletin board there and found your card, called you and was like, please, ma'am, help me. Help me. And it's brought a lot of things for me, like even just meeting you. So I feel like it's just like it's meant to be. So it just little things here and there come out of nowhere.
Well, I appreciate that. You finding me helped me find parts of myself in my work. So it's really just fun. It's that same exchange that we're talking about. Everything is meant to interact with each other. And what you're talking about, I really like, because there's a certain level of maturity I feel like we arrive at. And it's not maturity in the sense of like numbers of how old we are or whatever. It's an acceptance that we can play and we can be silly. We can show the world the lightheartedness, the beauty, the sadness, whatever we're expressing, in ways that many, many, many people cannot. And so that purpose of just existing and being willing to express what's inside somehow on the outside is a very bold and courageous thing to do. I do not know a lot of other professions that aren't creative. Okay, so comedians do it all the time. They bomb all the time, but they continually put themselves out there
Yeah.
And part of that is not knowing the end result. Whereas these linear paths that we're talking about, it's a very, sometimes very logical, and it is laid out. And if you think about people who have the straight path and they don't even go for it, and you think about the creative life where there's really no answer, and yet we still decide every day to get up and do it. And
Yeah.
so, in that way, I feel like creative people are very courageous.
Yeah. And I've kind of been doing that, I think. Well, first of all, I want to say I feel so seen. Thank you.
I see you.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of been doing that like my whole life when I think back because um I'm one of three. I'm the middle child. I have a younger brother, older sister, and we had a lot of times where we like really spent time together, kind of like figuring things out and kind of like keeping each other going and kind of like allowing each other to just be who we were going to be no matter what, and supporting that. And then when I got to um college and I played Division 3 lacrosse, that's the exact situation where it's like I'm not getting a athletic scholarship. I'm showing up to 5 a.m. practice every day because I want to be there. I don't really have to. Nothing's going to happen if I don't show up. Besides, I might have to go run until I can't walk. But but it's we're there because we want to be there, and just taking that initiative in like various parts of my life, like always just trying to kind of like some call it, overachieving. But, in some ways it definitely has a side where it's gone too far, where I've just like gone above and beyond and, maybe overextended myself there. But for the most part, it's like, I want to give myself space to like do the best and to show up and be reliable and not only for others but for myself, because it's important to me to be consistent, not give up, and like move forward with things. And I really appreciate you saying all that, because it's really hard doing this. It's scary, like I'm just turned, well, no, not just turned 30. I turned 30 in September. So I'm like, I'm halfway through it almost, but I'm like, man, like how much longer am I going to be kind of like at this point? And I've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time, it feels like, since, finishing grad school and everything. But, compared to others that might not look the same. But yeah, I mean, it's like every day, I'm getting up without that much structure besides what I put on myself, and trying to achieve these things and trying to, as you pointed out to me, before one of our sessions, like interpret the way that I look at the world for another person to view, for them to then show another person, and like trying to communicate. And, it's a very personal thing, as well as you know, a lot of brain work to do that, and also just like feel confident about it. And I don't always feel confident or sure of what I'm doing, like most of the time not. So yeah, I mean, we're out here every day trying to make it in the world.
Yeah, and that it it's so cliche, but it's so true. Like it just comes with time and repetition, that feedback. And then you're like, oh yeah, I can draw that. I mean, if it's like the first time you
Yeah.
try to draw something, it's like, maybe I can draw that, and then you
Yeah.
draw it and you're like, oh, it looks like crap. Okay. But it's like you have to have the contrast to know.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to. And it's inside the contrast, I think, that a lot of people get annoyed because they're like, again, they want to be at the end when it's
Yeah.
all great and they draw it perfectly. And I'm like, but also, where's the fun in that?
Yeah. Yeah, just
And
being good at everything,
just use AI, okay? Like, don't get me
Yeah.
started on AI.
Yeah.
um,
Skip it all.
so let's talk about, just for a moment, one of the things in your career that you feel really, really proud of, And this can be the experience you went through, the end result, the lessons learned, the friendships made, whatever you would like.
Um, I think that the children's book that I did, that was like a really, I mean, off the bat, that's like a project to me that I'm very proud of, because I was having a lot of trouble creating like a full piece, in my opinion. I did a lot of like vignettes, which for those that don't know is just kind of like, it's almost like a sticker. Like it's just like there's no background. And it was like I was so focused on like my subject matter that I kind of like would forget about what was behind it or what it was doing. It was just like floating in space. And, that was like for some reason bothering me for a while. So I was just so proud of myself that I was able to like create like this full body of work that also encompassed this kind of like warm style of the children's books that I remember reading when I was a kid, that really made me feel comforted and kind of like embodied what I felt like being a kid meant. And, I really worked on trying to communicate that through the way I executed the medium and just everything in the book, but then also adding kind of and exploring these like fun little poppy things here and there that are kind of like, what I call like my like glittery adornments in there mixed in. And, they didn't end up in the final book, but but I still got to, really explore that. And, I think that was just like such another difficult thing to kind of like get through for me, due to like confidence, but also just like that was my very first project, like right out of grad school. And, I had a general idea of how these things were supposed to go, but I hadn't done it before. So it was just like getting over that hump and like finding the confidence deep in myself to do that. So I'm like really proud that I did that, was able to execute it. But then also I would say overall, something like a little bit less like tangible is I'm really like proud of my let's call it tenacity, I guess, to like we were just talking about, to just keep going and just like finding various resources and kind of like making something out of nothing. I've kind of like spent a lot of time just like trying to make connections, networking, trying to find other artists in the area, even if it's like their work looks nothing like mine or they're a different medium, showing up to, the Norfolk drawing group and doing figure drawing, and or working at an art studio, working with you. I've just been trying to kind of like not even make a name for myself in the area, but just trying to surround myself and create that world that I like want to be in. And, that's been difficult, because it's not like we're in, New York City and it's like I can find a whole lot of people right off the bat. So it's been like a challenge where it was up and down a lot, that I would kind of get really defeated and then I would pick myself back up. Or, there's been lots of like different barriers here and there, even like joining like Illustrator associations that are, their annual fee to be a member is like way too expensive for me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like that's later down the road. I'll get in there. But just, yeah, I guess my resourcefulness to even get to this point right here, right now. I haven't really like actually acknowledged this for myself, but I'm really proud of it. And like, that makes me feel good for like the kind of like scared, but then also like dreaming little girl that was like, I'm going to be an illustrator. And I have no idea how I would do anything like that. But like, yeah, one day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the day has already come.
Yeah.
You are an illustrator. And that's so just like relatable, because there's so many artists who they do feel the same way. Isolated, lonely, where the heck are the people? Should I show up? Do I belong there?
Yeah.
Just these thoughts where it's if we acted upon those desires to be part of that by being ourselves, um, it's my hope that you would experience that world that you want to be in, and people would be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here." That's how I envision the ideal community to be.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we know that it's not always ideal, but it doesn't matter because you're there for your intent, whatever that might be. Get better
Mm-hmm.
at figure drawing, find one person who's along the same path but using a different style, or find a business card. It's like you never
Yeah.
know what you're going to experience, but having the boldness and like just sticking to that commitment and decision is a very, you know, admirable thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm
Thanks.
really happy for you. I will
Thanks.
I will put in a image of the cover, and I'm not sure what I'm allowed to use, but I will just flash something up there so they can see the book that
Cool.
you worked on and learned from in the process. So we just have
Yeah.
a couple more questions, and then we're out of here. Is there any advice that you would like to extend? First, we're going to go back and talk to your younger self. What, what advice or knowledge would you give to your younger self, little baby Candace?
I would say that um, I guess what comes to mind is like, you know, while diamonds are made under pressure, I've know nothing about the diamond making process or anything like that, but I know that they're made under pressure. Inconsistent amounts of pressure doesn't always like make the diamond faster, like from my knowledge and understanding. It's like just thinking about like squeezing something so hard that like you can't even squeeze anymore because you're so tired. It doesn't really speed up the process, rather than a little bit at a time, over and over again consistently. You're going to get that end result. And I think kind of just telling my smaller self that, like, hey, maybe chill out, you'll get there. You don't have to go through all of that to be there, like it's all going to work out. And also, maybe just telling myself that, like, your blind optimism, don't let anyone else, put it down, because it's fine. It's gotten you far, and I think it's going to take me a lot farther. And, I think that anyone who is told that they're too positive is, I think that don't listen. you know.
I think that's interesting because when we relax into flow and relax into knowing yourself so well, we perceive time differently. So there's the scientific aspect of flow where like it's transient hypofrontality, like your brain is actually less active in certain places that quantify and perceive time. But I'm talking about the depth of your experience as a person. You can't have that. Well, most of the time we don't have that perspective because we haven't been living that long. And so
Yeah.
it makes sense that we're kind of impatient because we
Yeah.
don't exactly know how time works at
Yeah.
such a young age. Yet, you know, it's funny because older people, wiser people will be like, it's okay, you'll get there, just stick with it, or you'll understand one day. You'll start prioritizing things differently because you'll understand time differently.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when you actually realize it, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. And you're
you
like,
know
how much time did I waste worrying? Huh.
or trying to force, like you said, and being
Yeah.
so tired that you kind of almost set yourself back because you didn't rest. Or
Yeah.
your idea of that end, right? Instead of the waves and the flow and the acceptance. All right. So, where can we find you and your art? Is there anything you'd like to share so we can connect with you?
You can find my online portfolio on my website, which is CandaceMoranIllustration.com. So my first and last name, illustration. And also you can follow me on Instagram, which is at cand_ills, like candles, but Candace illustrates. And yeah, I mean, I'm in the Virginia Beach area, and probably see me around here walking around with my dogs and going to art shows and anything. If you are around in the local area and like pop up at any art stuff, yeah, hopefully I'll see you there.
Cool. And so the next thing you're working on is with the aquarium, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That, and I'm trying to, I think I told you about it a while back briefly, but I'm trying to work on a field guide and about nocturnal pollinators, as well as where birds go at night. So I'm kind of like in the very beginning stages of that, in terms of like just figuring out species, who's supposed to be in the book, and where to get some quality references. I would love to just like, go to South America and just take a bunch of pictures of bats and stuff, but we're not there. So
Yeah, but maybe someone listening is a photographer in South
yeah.
America who
Yeah.
can connect with you um, for the reference photos. You never know.
Yep.
Um, all right.
You
So
take
is there
cool animal photos, send them my way.
Candace, it's been a pleasure hearing from you, hearing your voice, seeing your lovely face, and the light that you have for what you're doing and the concern you have for our planet. It's just really, really wonderful to see. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we close out?
I would just like to say, one, thank you so much for having me on here and giving me a nice platform to just talk to other artists and, people, other creatives in general, and hopefully inspire others who are, maybe in the same boat as me or even further along, to just keep going, and that, you know, just be optimistic, and also, make actions and celebrate the things that you do, no matter if anyone else is celebrating it with you. And we're all in this together, fighting the everyday imposter syndrome. So, it's, we'll all get through it. But thank you so much, Anna. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. It's time for us to go and do other things we love. And we want to thank everyone for listening. And I hope to see, hear, meet anyone who's listening in the future, either in a new episode of Flow Dive or somewhere out there in the creative world. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.